Great. Thank you very much, and thank you everyone for joining. Um, my name is David Mitchell. I'm an associate professor at UCF, half in the material science and engineering department and half in the mechanical and aerospace engineering departments. I'm building the what we call the Extremes Lab, um, and we're working on developing advanced materials and advanced manufacturing processes for application in extreme environments. So a little bit about myself. I got my Ph.D. and my undergraduate bachelor's at University of Florida. I did my research for that Ph.D. at Oak Ridge National Laboratory under a fellowship at the High Temperature Materials Laboratory, which was the DOE user center of that decade. And so it was a really great experience for me to actually move from a university to a national lab to do some research. When I graduated, I went to GE and I worked on silicon carbide CMCs. GE has put them into aircraft engines, and at the time I was there, they were the ones pushing them the hardest and the furthest. And so it was a good team to be a part of. I went to Boeing in Southern California, worked on the space shuttle at the time, and also hypersonic vehicles, which really kind of started pulling me more into hypersonic vehicles. I spent almost 15 years at Siemens, right across the street from UCF, and that's where I got to know Dr. Seal and Dr. Kapat and Dr. Ahmed, and really kind of got to know the department's materials and mechanical engineering. I went back to Oak Ridge for about 5 years and helped them rebuild their ceramics labs and their capability for advanced manufacturing of ceramics and ceramics matrix composites. And then I came here to UCF as part of the Hypersonics Center of Excellence hires in order to bring extreme environment materials processing to UCF. So looking forward to building the lab and building the work here. The materials that we work in go from about 1,000 degrees C to 3,000 degrees C and higher. Super alloys and coatings are really kind of the bottom end of where I work. Oxide composites were heavily used at Siemens and are used in exhausts for engines. A good chunk of my work and life has been spent working on silicon carbide composites of various types. Silicon carbide composites are heavily used for gas turbines and aircraft engines because they have environmental durability that you need. And then in the high temperature regime, we start working on carbon fiber with silicon carbide at the 1750 C kind of temperatures. That's kind of the cutting edge of hypersonic materials right now. But if you look at the top of this screen in the top right, that's where we're going. And if we need to get above 1750 C, which is where we need to go and where we're kind of lacking in materials, we're still developing materials with refractory metals mixed with ceramics to try to get all of the properties we need in order to survive those temperatures. Fortunately, the lifetimes are fairly short, less than 100 hours, typically less than an hour. And so it makes it easier at some level. So the objective of our lab is to really develop novel composite materials and advanced manufacturing processes because these materials are very hard to process because of their temperature capability. And we want to enable those extreme environment applications. At the top of my list right now is reusable hypersonic and space vehicles. But these materials are also applicable in industrial gas and aero turbines, in nuclear fission and fusion power, the new tokamak reactors, and heat exchangers for concentrated solar power can get really hot. So silicon carbide is finding a home there. If you want to operate in an extreme environment, you have three main properties that are critical to your survival. One is strength at high temperature. One is environmental resistance, and the third is damage tolerance. You need those three properties to be maximized in order to operate in the kind of regimes that are extreme. So this plot, I would say that this plot was pulled from a journal article, and the only part that I don't really agree with is the refractory metals. The refractory metals actually have pretty good strength at temperature. They're up a little lower than the composites there in orange. The problem is like ceramics, they're very brittle. So if you have any flaws when you do your testing, you will definitely get lower results. But I tend to operate in the orange, red, and purple area up in here, which is the CMCs, ceramic matrix composites. And if you're up in the 1750 to 2000s, that's really the kind of material you're going to need. So we talked about the strength. That's the strength that you need at temperature. The second part was environmental resistance. So oxidation is really the killer. If you can get your strength to work, and we can get the strength to work in some materials, their oxidation resistance is not sufficient. So the refractory metals have outstanding high melting temperatures and high temperature strength, but unfortunately, almost all of them have really terrible oxidation properties at high temperature. And so if you look at the straight up zirconium carbides, and things like that, they really, molybdenum is a great material, but again, and niobium, really poor oxidation properties. So I wrote a paper with some friends at Oak Ridge National Lab on oxidation of high temperatures, and we identified some compositions that can work at temperatures above 1750 C, and we're really shooting for 2400 C. So as you can see, we really have our work cut out for us here. So the third part of that triangle is damage tolerance. Ceramics and refractory metals are very strong in compression and very strong at high temperatures. However, they all fail catastrophically, like that monolithic ceramic plate you see at the bottom left. This has been the problem with ceramics and refractory metals for decades. You can't function in a structural environment with tensile stresses if you have this kind of failure behavior. So we develop composite materials, and in the composite materials, we tend to put fibers. That's the current way of doing it. And we typically have fiber coatings, and the fiber coatings are where I would say 80% of the technology is, and it is critical to have a coating that gives you enough connection to get fiber pullout. Excuse me, we'll look at composite failure behavior. That fiber pullout is what gives you that damage tolerance. If you look at the curve at the bottom, a monolithic ceramic and a refractory metal will essentially load up to a very high stress and then fail catastrophically, and your stress drops to zero. That's not ideal for a structural application for any part. So that curve that really stretches out to the right is what we're looking for. That's what you'll get with a metal, and that's what we try to create with these composite structures. So those fibers being pulled out as the material fails gives you that damage tolerance, graceful failure behavior, so that you can identify a failure before it happens. Or at least as it's happening, not after it's happened. So in order to manufacture these composites for 2400 C, right now the state-of-the-art composites have silicon carbide matrices. Silicon carbide is limited to 1750 C based on the stability of the silicon dioxide protective oxidation surface. Silica and alumina are used heavily in oxidation protection of alloys and ceramics. However, at about 1750 C, they start vaporizing and they're no longer protective. And so what we found in the industry is that we're just going to have multi-materials and UHTCs. So we're going to have to start mixing up things. You've heard of high entropy alloys. High entropy ceramics is now something that people are talking about. And so this year we submitted a UCO proposal from my lab to synthesize new UHTC pre-ceramic polymers, which you need in order to fabricate these parts, to create an advanced manufacturing filament winding system, along with UT, University of Tennessee, Knoxville, and develop a graded CMC matrix structure so we can get some environmental resistance in the outer edges of these composites. I have a lot of experience with PIP, which is critical to make composites in a fairly quick fashion relative to some of the other processes out there. I've been coordinating with some UCF professors in a couple different departments that have more polymer chemistry and organic metallic background than I do, so we can create these polymers. And then my expertise will come in when we start doing additive manufacturing of these composites, and we're looking at making full-scale components for testing. This is also something that's in my background, so I'll bring that leverage to my programs and make parts for engine tests and rocket tests and things like that. At the bottom are just a couple of the ways that you can make pre-ceramic polymers, and we'll be exploring these and several others to try to identify the right ways to make pre-ceramic polymers that have multiple elements in them. So additive manufacturing of continuous fiber CMCs is in its infancy. As far as I know, this is one of the first accomplishments of that task. When I was at Oak Ridge, my team and I worked with Desktop Metal. That's the printer in the top left. The printer in the top right are various continuous fiber ceramic matrix composites that this printer automatically printed. So what we did is we took a printer that's used to printing carbon composites, which is very common. And instead of using the matrix, or actually we used the same matrix, which was PEEK. And so they were able to print that, but instead of printing it with they printed it with carbon fibers, and when we were done, we melt infiltrated it. So we took the carbon that is in the matrix and we put it in contact with a silicon powder source and we melted. And in that way, the silicon will wick into the microstructure and convert about 80 to 90% of the carbon in the matrix to silicon carbide. It's very fortunate to leave the fibers intact, and you can see at the bottom left what we call veins sheathing around. So we did Raman spectroscopy, and you can see in the lighter areas and on the right hand side where you see the red and the green, the red is residual silicon that is always left when you melt infiltrate. The green is silicon carbide that is converted, and these actually packed around the fiber toes. So in the top right picture in letter D, you can see what is essentially a fiber bundle of carbon fibers, and that monolithic material that's around it is silicon carbide and silicon. We had great damage tolerance. We were able to drive a nail through it and do all of the things that you do when you try to demonstrate that a ceramic has damage tolerance, but this one was additively manufactured. So this is work that I intend to continue strongly in the lab here. The other real focus of my research has been to actually eliminate fibers. Fibers are very difficult to additively manufacture. They make life challenging, although they give you fantastic properties. My graduate work was in refractory metals and ceramics and making them into laminate composites. But now we have the ability to take those refractory metals and print them into very complex shapes. And so I started this here with these simple lattices. I can't show the work, but I've also accomplished this with more complex lattice structures like a gyroid structure. And so we're seeing good results on mechanical properties. We infiltrated these. Some of them were molybdenum carbide. Some of them were molybdenum. Some of them were tungsten lattices. These were all printed through additive manufacturing and then infiltrated with ceramic processes that we created at Oak Ridge. And these, again, are the infiltration processes we'll be continuing to develop here at UCF. So as far as my plan, my 5-year plan is to really outfit the lab with the basic necessities to get into materials development. Into year 2 and into year 3, we're going to start acquiring more additive manufacturing machines. These are pretty expensive and will probably have to come as duraps with some of our DoD programs. And then some of the really bigger programs and bigger stuff will come later. But we will also pull in a heavy modeling and simulation aspect for both the materials processing and the materials behavior. And then, like I said, this picture of this rocket is actually parts that we had at Oak Ridge that flew on that. Getting your stuff on actual flights is a big deal, and it really lends a lot of credibility to those materials. As far as my 10-year plan, I really want to build a strong advanced manufacturing program here, strong enough to either have DoD or NSF want to put a manufacturing center of excellence here, including a new building, and just really start to outfit the similar kind of place that we had at Oak Ridge with a lot of manufacturing sciences and a lot of multidisciplinary faculty working in there. My acknowledgements are primarily funding sources that I've had over the years that I am now in communication with, to continue funding the research that I do, although here at a university. Most of these organizations will find it much easier to fund me at UCF than they did at Oak Ridge National Lab. And of course, Michael, Sudipta, and Wab, Jay, and Kareem are the ones who helped bring me here and really helped me start this lab and this work. So I appreciate that.